distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're all having a wonderful stay in India. Thank you for being here. On behalf of India, I welcome all of you here. Actually, the Honorable Minister for Tourism was supposed to be here. He just resigned 2 days back. And you know, in many ways, I'm in many ways like this great scientist, Einstein. You know, he'd won the Nobel Prize for science, and you know, he was being honored in Britain. He went to about 250 odd universities, gave speeches. He was widely appreciated everywhere. And you know, wherever he used to go, his driver used to go along with him. And then, for the first time, he was invited by the Columbia University. He'd never been to America, and this driver said, Einstein, I've always traveled with you, and I've heard you about 250 odd times, and actually I can give a better speech than what you can ever give in your life. And so Einstein said, okay, I challenge you. And so they went to Columbia University, and this driver took the mic, and he gave a brilliant speech. I mean, it was a stupendous performance. It was a speech far better than Einstein had ever given in his life. And everybody got up, standing ovation for this driver. Then, you know, he sat down, and then the dean said that we'll now have a question-answer session. And this young student got up, and he asked him a very difficult, very complicated, it was a perplexing question. So this driver got up and said, this question of yours is so simple, so easy, that even my driver sitting in the audience can reply. So ladies and gentlemen, let me speak. And if you have any questions, please direct them at the minister later. So you know, there's a French proverb which says that the more things change, the more they remain the same. But you know, there's one sector which defies this logic, and that's the world of travel and tourism. Last year, about 1 billion tourists traveled across geographical boundaries. That's 1/7 of your humanity. 1 in 11 jobs are created by tourism sector. 7% of the global GDP comes from the tourism, and almost 30% of the trade in services comes from the tourism sector. But the tourism sector is going through some revolutionary changes. And it's very important to discern them. It's important to discern them because in many ways, they'll shape this world of wellness and spa as well. I think the most important thing to understand that the source of tourism is changing. You know, for many years, this travel and tourism industry was designed for the world of Europe and America. And that is because the world was growing, the growth was being driven by Europe and America. But if you look around today, in 2011, the BRIC countries actually created in 1 year, in 2011, they created Italy. One country in 1 year. And actually, in 2013, despite the slowdown, China created a Greece in 12 and a half weeks. In 12 and a half weeks, China has created an Italy. And therefore, if you travel around like I did to the Louvre, you will find Chinese-speaking guides, you will find exhibits in Chinese, you will see their websites in Chinese, and the New York Times has come out with a digital version of the Chinese. You can read the whole New York Times in Chinese. And therefore, last year, you know, despite the slowdown, there were about 16 million Indians traveling abroad. And therefore, much like the Americans in the 50s when they moved out, in the 70s, many of us have this image of a Japanese guide leading the Japanese. The Japanese were traveling with one guide in front with the flag and all the Japanese following him, or the Koreans. You will see a lot of Chinese and Indians moving abroad. So I think what is happening is that the source of tourism is changing. And it's the emergence of the Asian tigers in many ways. It's the re-emergence of the Asian tigers in many ways. I think the second key trend that is happening is the demographics. And it's important to discern this because, to my mind, this is the most salient, most critical. It's a revolutionary and an astonishing change that is taking place. The aging of the population in Europe and America, 77 million Americans retiring from 2010 onwards, 8,000 Americans retiring a day, 8,500 Germans retiring a day, and the aging of the population, and the population getting younger and younger, and almost 76% of the population less than the age of 32 in India. And that is this window of demographic transition which rarely ever happens in history happening in India. And therefore, it's very important to understand this, that the age of baby boomers in Europe and America who drove the growth, who brought in economic prosperity, who brought in new style, who brought in new cars, new perfumes, etc., that's an aging population in Europe and America now. I think the third key trend, which is important to understand, is the rise of the urban middle classes. And that's a huge, huge trend taking place. It's a big trend because the latest McKinsey study shows that actually 750 million Indians will get into the process of urbanization by 2050. And actually, from 78 onwards, China has created 500 new cities. Astounding number, 500 new cities in China from 78. And that's the reason they grew at rates of 10% per annum year after year. And if you grow at that rate, you double your income in 7 years' time. And China demonstrated that. From 10% growth consecutively over a 3.5-decade period. And therefore, this is the rise of the urban middle classes, and what we see in India is exactly the same now. 14 million mobiles a month. The rate of credit card growth is about 40% per annum, and this is despite a slowdown. All this is happening. So the rise of the urban middle class, and consequent to that is this huge rise of urbanization, of people moving from rural areas to city. And one of my key jobs right now is to create 24 new smart cities in India. And this is going to happen in a very big way, this process of urbanization, people moving from rural areas to urban areas. And of course, the role of technology. We are in the midst of revolutionary changes, and we've seen this happening in the travel and tourism sector. We'll see the slow demise of tour operators and travel agents who are not able to provide an experience. And actually, in many ways, mobile will become the key driver of travel and tourism, and it'll be travel anywhere, anytime on the basis of your mobile, which will then become your search engine, your travel agent, your booking engine, everything together. But I think, to my mind, the biggest change and the most radical factor that is happening in the world of tourism is this shift towards what I would term as the experiential tourism. And that is the shift towards people going for self-fulfillment. The UN World Tourism Organization in the late 80s got a person called Peter Adelberg, and he looked at the top 10,000 people, the top 10,000 upper end of the market, the elite class. And he said, what do you want to do in 1980s? When you want to have a great holiday, what do you want to do? And you won't believe it, 97% of them then said, we want to go for a triple S holiday, the sun, sand, and the sea. In 2010 end, they got another researcher to look at the same segment of the population, 10,000 people, and they said, what do you want to do in 2010? And they said, we want to go for a holiday which is self-fulfilling, where we can contribute to the destination, where we can learn something from that destination. And actually, we are getting fed up of this 5-star world. Every room is the same. Every feature is the same. And we want to experience tourism. We want to experience destination as it exists. And therefore, what we are witnessing today is what I would term as the rise of the alert independent traveler. And this alert independent traveler is going to be the big changer of travel and tourism. And what we are actually witnessing is slowly the demise of mass tourism. And the mass tourism actually led to, in many ways, uneven development, cultural invasion. It had led to destruction of culture in several destinations. And in many ways, this alert independent traveler is one who's going to be the big value spender. The alert independent traveler, he wants to travel at his time, he wants to experience a destination, and he wants a unique self-fulfilling experience. And I think that is what, to my mind, travel and tourism is driving towards. These are big changes which are taking place. And some of these experiences I learned from what I did in Kerala and India, and Susan wanted me to take you through some of that. And I'll quickly try and take you through this. When we started this campaign for Branding India, India was pretty badly rated. It was very low in travel and tourism competitiveness. Its image perception as a tourism-friendly country was extremely low. But in the same surveys, India was rated very high in terms of culture and heritage. It was very high in terms of authenticity, history, art, and culture. And the challenge for us was how do you brand and position India as a high-value destination for the alert, independent traveler, for the discerning traveler of the world. My view has always been that you should focus on the high-value as a high-value destination, position and brand yourself as a unique destination based on your unique features, which I'll come to. And the World Travel and Tourism Council had then predicted that actually, during this period of 2018, India could have an annualized real growth of 9.4, which was higher than China. There was a huge potential for growth. And my own experience came from Kerala, which is a small strip of land, but it is unique for its Ayurveda, and it's absolutely green, and we moved away from it was a beach destination. We used to get charter load of flights of garbage collectors and cobblers from Manchester and London. And we stopped beach tourism. They used to pay 18 pounds a night, and they used to enjoy worth about 300 pounds a night, the sun, sand, and sea. So we stopped that. We created two new unique products, the backwaters of Kerala, houseboat on which not a single nail is used. We created another unique product, the Ayurveda, as an alternative medicine, as a way of life, as a regimen, not a massage. And this became a unique product. We said Kerala was home to Ayurveda because it had a continuous, unbroken tradition. It had a very rigorous scientific approach. It was home to the Ashtavadyas, the traditional physicians, and it had all the 8 branches of Ayurveda treatment. It had a very advantageous terrain and climate, which is very critical. It was very good during the monsoon. It had rich biodiversity. And in many ways, Ayurveda was a way of life in Kerala. And we said that in the monsoon season, which used to be our off-season, it's the best time to go for Ayurveda. And therefore, soon we found that monsoon season became packed. We used to get people for 21 days, and the off-season really became the main season for Ayurveda. And we followed a very rigorous scientific approach. And Kerala has about 16 Ayurvedic medical colleges where Ayurveda is taught, and research is done. So Ayurveda became one of the key drivers of Kerala tourism. Today, there are about 119 government-run Ayurveda hospitals. There are dispensaries and so on. But we have a very large pool of qualified, trained professionals. We have doctors, we have therapists. And Kerala really grew as an Ayurveda destination. And today, because we follow a very stringent quality control, a process of certification of green leaf Ayurveda and olive green Ayurveda centers, Ayurveda has gone across the world. Actually, all over. Kerala is also India's most advanced society. It is a very high physical quality of life index. It's got 100% literacy. And so we said when life gets tiring, apply Kerala. And one of the things we did was we differentiated Kerala. We said we'll never ape the West. We'll go back to its root. So whether you look at its cultural holidays, whether you look at its elephant pageants, whether you look at its boat races, whether you look at its tiger trail where we converted poachers into guides, whether you look at its tree huts, whether we look at its mother of martial arts, its unique cuisine, travel and tourism brought it all together, brought them all back. So soon Kerala was declared by National Geographic Travelers one of the 10 exotic paradises of the world, one of the 50 must-see destinations of the world. And I moved on from Kerala to India. And the challenge was then to brand and position India. And again, we went back to the roots of India. We went back, we again said that what is it unique about India? And if you look at India's yoga, and you look at how we played with the eye here, if you look at Ayurveda, if you look at yoga, Ayurveda, if you look at reflexography, if you look at meditation in Himalayas, if you look at reflexography in the deserts of Rajasthan or Ayurveda in the backwaters of Kerala, or you say that when life, get rid of 21st century stress, stand for 5,000 years, or we said, what time weakens, nature can strengthen. And we also brought in this tiger, and we said not all Indians are polite, hospitable, and vegetarian. And we also said, don't panic, there's always rebirth. We said, leave your body to ancient science. We said, on your way back, you might find it easier to read this. And we said all medicines have a manufacturing date. This one, for instance, was made in 3500 BC. And we looked at yoga, and just to give you this little feel by Deepak Chopra on spirituality.
India is a very diverse country. It's an ancient civilization. There's an exquisite combination of contemporary, fashionable living along with very traditional values. Health is all-inclusive in the Indian sense. It's a state of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. There's nothing artificial about India. Its people radiate a simple, unaffected humanity. You could spend many lifetimes here. India is holy, it is whole, it is healing.
So ladies and gentlemen, what is India's brand power? And I'll turn back to this great Harvard professor, Joseph Nye, who talks about soft power. And in many ways, there's the hard power of India. There's information technology, there's manufacturing, there's urbanization, there's growth. But I think in many ways, India's growth will be driven by its soft power. It's yoga, it's Ayurveda, it's meditation, it's culture, it's Bollywood, it's cuisine, and so on. And as India becomes a modern, contemporary nation, grows and advances, it's very important for it to retain its heritage, its culture, its core values, and especially its great spirituality. And I think ladies and gentlemen, this concept of spa, as it grew and evolved in Europe and America, it was a curative science. In the concept of India, it's about spiritual harmony. It's about soul nourishment. And, actually, beauty is the ultimate in consciousness, as far as the Vedas say. The Indian treaties of Vedas say the beauty is the ultimate. It's the path to the origin of life. And beauty is to be respected. But in the Indian context, we believe that the gods reside within us. And we need to assuage our gods once in a while through breathing, on a regular basis, through meditation, through yoga. And only when you have this perfect harmony between the mind and the body, when you have this perfect harmony between the mind and the body, and they are both in parallel universe, you can't have a track where the mind is on another wavelength and the body in another wavelength. If they are in two different wavelengths, you will never be beautiful. And therefore, the mind and body connect is the key to the ultimate achievement of beauty. And therefore, for us, is that cosmic connection, And that is what you call is the spa, is what we Indians said was the ashram. And in the ashram, it was about being reborn during this life itself through this perfect connect between the mind and the body. And that is what spiritual harmony and soul nourishment was all about. And that was the ultimate level of beauty. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.